Jack Herrera famously said, I'm not sure if hemp will save the world, but it's the only thing that can. And although that's a loaded statement, Hempcrete is a very real answer to addressing waste and carbon emissions in our building industry. It's healthy, non-toxic, fire, mildew, rot, pest resistant, and also carbon sequestering.
Welcome to Sustainability Now, technologies and paradigms to shape a world that works. Designed for everyone interested in responsible stewardship of the planet, covering topics related to food, energy, housing, water, waste, health, economics, and consciousness. Welcome to your community, Sustainability Now, with your host, Scott Billy.
Hey everybody, I'm Scott Billy. Today I'll be your host on Sustainability Now, and I'm proud to introduce Cameron McIntosh, founder of the Hempcrete installation firm Americhanvre Cast Hemp. He sits on the board of US Hemp Building Association and also is about to become the Hemp Local Supply Chain Committee Coordinator for All Together Now Pennsylvania. It's a cool organization put together by Judy Wicks, a Pennsylvania activist and restaurateur, focused on connecting rural and urban areas together to create a local supply chain so that we can become self-reliant. He's also the co-host of the Hemp Entrepreneur podcast, covering all things related to hemp production, processing, and manufacturing. So welcome, Cameron.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott.
Let's dig right in and talk a little bit about Hempcrete or hemp and lime construction.
So I'll start by saying that Hempcrete, although it's widely accepted as the term for the material that we're using, is actually a misnomer. It implies a similarity to concrete that many people make the mistake. Myself, I'm also guilty of this, of assuming that it can be used in the same way as concrete. It is first and foremost a non-structural biocomposite insulation material that takes the place of everything in a traditional wall assembly except for the frame. So on new construction, you're replacing vinyl siding, house wrap, vapor barrier, plywood sheeting, insulation, and drywall, all with this one material. And it's then finished with a lime plaster on either side, traditional lime plaster. So many wonderful aspects to the material. First and foremost, again, it's incredibly performant thermal and acoustic insulation because it's got mass. So it's a combination of the inner woody core of the hemp stalk and a lime-based binder, which creates a matrix in the wall of trapped air pockets. So it's sort of got the consistency of wet granola. You place it into a cavity that you create with two form boards on either side of the frame, and it's self-supporting right away, so you can keep moving those forms up as you're going. And again, it replaces all those things that I just mentioned. So because of this combination of lime and hemp hurd, you end up with an almost masonry-like material in the wall that has what we call thermal mass. So it's very good at absorbing and holding and slowly dissipating heat and cool energy, much more performant than your typical bat or spray foam insulations. And also to compare it to those two things, it is completely healthy, non-toxic, actually improves interior air quality because it's vapor permeable. So it's always transferring water moisture from one side of the wall to the other. And in doing so, exposing it to the alkaline environment within the wall created by the lime binder. So you're getting, air purification and ionization happening. It's very good at balancing humidity in a home. So you see, a decreased need for humidification or dehumidification, depending on what climate you're in. Does a very good job of balancing itself as far as that's concerned. And that also adds to its thermal capacity, making it even more dynamic than, again, traditional insulation materials. And on top of all that, it is mold, mildew, fire, rot, and pest resistant. Probably most remarkably, damn near fireproof, because you've encapsulated all of the organic material, including the studs in the wall, with this lime binder. So it does not smoke. and it will not ignite openly when exposed to flame. So add to all of those things that I just mentioned that it's also renewable and, can be sustainably produced and harvested. Hemp grows in 6 months as opposed to, a minimum of 20 years for wood. Add to all of that it's actually capturing more carbon than it takes to produce that material. So you're actually working with a carbon negative building material.
That's great. And the point on the vapor permeability, as opposed to a normal, the way we build houses here in the US, where we try to get the airtight box and then you're forcing machinery to move air in and out of it and controlling it with humidity and all, I imagine you're saving a lot of energy cost as far as moisture control and as well as heating and cooling.
Yeah, that's correct, Scott. I am conservative when I tell people this, depending on the design of the building, the area that you're building in, and also your personal preferences. You can see anywhere from a 30 to 60% reduction in heating and cooling costs when using this material. Again, because you've created that thermal mass in the wall. So it does an amazing job of leveling out temperature spikes from HVAC systems turning on and off, doors and windows opening and closing. When they've studied it, they've shown that the temperature within a hempcrete home stays relatively the same throughout the day. There's no spikes up and down like you normally see with, again, like you said, our traditional American method of building an airtight box and handling everything mechanically. This is one of the things that makes it a little bit difficult right now, and we'll get into the atmosphere around using this material, but it's one of the things that makes it a little bit difficult because, again, here in the States, we're so focused on where and how to use a vapor barrier to stop certain things. And if you're paying attention as a builder or a homeowner, they sort of change their mind every couple of years on where and how to use vapor barriers because you've got these perennial issues with mold that continue to arise. So vapor permeability is a little bit of a phase shift for the American building environment as opposed to in Europe, where you've got, structures that people have been living in consistently for 600 years that have, old timber frame, masonry, lime plasters, things that are inherently vapor permeable. So the European model is a little bit more friendly and open to the idea of having a vapor transfer in the wall system. And again, it adds to that thermal capacity. It gives it another layer of ability to store and then transfer energy because it's working with the moisture in the space rather than against it.
Yeah, I used to build log houses, and one of the advantages was the stack of logs was a great source, as like a big heat sink. You heat them up once and they just radiate heat all day from that thermal mass. And I imagine this is even better than that because you don't have the maintenance of the logs and, of course, the sustainability of producing something in half a year rather than waiting for a forest to grow to chop it down and make the house.
Right. And the logs, and you're exactly right. This is, log cabins are probably one of the best proxies for this if anyone's ever lived in or owned one. As you mentioned, very capable of keeping and holding energy. The difference being that the logs are very dense and they don't have that matrix of air pockets. So you're using the lime to suspend the hurd in such a way that it creates this interlocking matrix of air pockets, and it's that trapped air in the wall again that gives it some of that insulation value, just like a double pane window or a greenhouse with 2 layers of plastic. So you're missing some of that. So hempcrete, you're missing some of that with a log cabin. Hempcrete will absorb energy to a certain extent and then stop. Whereas logs or stone will continue to absorb energy until you stop giving them energy. So it's a little bit more dynamic, but very much the same sort of, functionality as a big, thick, heavy, stacked stone or timber wall.
You mentioned hemp hurd. Can you explain for our listeners what the hurd is out of the hemp plant?
Sure. So the primary, again, there's 3 primary components to hempcrete: the hemp hurd, the lime binder, and the water. That's it. There's no polymer. There's nothing, toxic or unnatural. And we are using the inner woody core of the true fiber industrial hemp stalk. So fiber industrial hemp, actually all cannabis, the fiber is actually on the outside of the stem, and the inner part of the stem is a woody core. Fiber industrial hemp is grown in such a way, it's packed tightly, so it's not like the CBD or, you know, adult or recreational medical cannabis that we see where they're growing them far apart and they're these little short stubby Christmas trees. Very different. That's not the type of hemp that we use. I get phone calls all the time about, you know, can I use my CBD stalks for Hempcrete? Unfortunately, you can't. The reason being that the true fiber industrial crop is planted just like that. It's a commodity crop. So spaced very close in rows, mechanically planted, mechanically harvested, and in doing so grows very tall and straight. And that creates an incredible capillary structure within that stalk that allows it to get 8 feet tall or more in, you know, 3 months or less. And to be able to take water from the ground all the way up to the top of that plant, you've got to have this amazing capillary structure. So the hurd is actually traditionally a byproduct of textile or fiber industrial hemp production, where, you know, the hemp was planted, it would grow, they would cut it in the field, stand it up in shocks, which I'm sure a lot of people have seen, you know, historical images of people doing that, and allow it to ret. And that process of retting is a microbial separation of the fiber from the hurd or the inner woody core. And that is actually the first step in decortication and softening and getting that fiber ready to be spun into a textile. So after they stood them up in shocks, they would take them and break them by hand, very laborious, with an apparatus in the field that would basically smash the stalk, and they would, you know, run these shocks through the thing and smash it and break the hurd away from the fiber, and the hurd was just left in the field. And actually, there's great references in Les Stark's book. Les is a local historian who wrote a book on hemp farming. We'll mention that at the end for everyone. In Lancaster County in Pennsylvania, the history of hemp farming in Lancaster County. And there are great references to, you know, the fires that people would set in their fields to burn this hurd away and then spread it back out in the field. So this has always been a byproduct of industrial hemp production for textile use, and typically has just been thrown away. And that's a shame, because it actually comprises about 75 to 85% of the biomass that you're growing. That fiber, the seed, the oil, all the other components on the cannabis plant represent 15 to 20% of the actual mass that's grown. So we are literally creating an end use and an end use market for a byproduct of textile, hemp textile production.
It's a real closed loop model where you're taking something that was seen as waste and turning it into an actual, you know, saleable end product. Right. And it's really in nature, there's no such thing as waste. So that's right. The model that we need moving forward. We need to be thinking about everything that we do and what is the end use of it, or how do we keep it in a circle so that it doesn't get an end of life? It just goes back into becoming something else.
Right.
So you wind up doing crop rotation now, where you're cycling in other plants to get the new soil nutrition back. But in the grand scheme of things, you're not wasting 80% of a plant that you grew. And, you know, even worse, a lot of situations you wind up burning that waste material, which, you know, puts all that carbon that you spent your time and energy sequestering back up into the air.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So has anybody done any calculations on like the total cost of ownership of a hemp home as opposed to a traditional?
We know from people that have built these homes, who are by and large a very special group of people who are forward thinking enough and willing to take the chance. We're getting information back from them that says that, you know, we're in that 30 to 60% range. We don't have anything empirical yet. And we're actually working with a nonprofit out in Newcastle, PA called Dawn Services. And it will be in conjunction with the Pennsylvania Housing Research Center at Penn State. So this is in their engineering department. They're the ones that have the earthquake racks for testing wall assemblies and the barometric chamber for recreating, different weather environments and things like that. And also the Parsons New School Healthy Materials Lab out of New York. We've all been written into a grant that was successfully funded by Dawn Services to study just that, just what you're talking about, and to prove that this material actually does, dramatically reduce the cost of ownership. This is another one of those things that we as Hempcrete builders and Hempcrete home owners all know that this is true, but we don't have the hard data yet to say it and prove it empirically. And that's super important for the next step in getting this material approved. But lots of talk, and one of the things that Dawn Services is focused on is creating affordable housing options for people with disabilities whose state benefits often do not serve them to the extent that they of their needs, really. So they're taking people with disabilities and placing them in situations that are far better than their state benefit will allow. If you're going to do that and you're going to give someone with a disability a home to own, why not use a material that's healthy and that will also reduce the cost of ownership? So now we will actually be able to say that Hempcrete is a low income housing solution where you're building with a healthy material that also has incredible thermal properties, fire resistant, and lowers the cost of ownership. So, for low income housing, you're also seeing a reduction in utilities. And low income housing, typically is slapped together just like everything else that we build here. It's a race to the bottom, low cost materials, spray foam, formaldehyde, petrochemical, this, that, the other, tapes and sealants. So, and that's one of the miserable things about low income housing and people in the inner cities is that when these projects happen, they're wonderful projects, but, often they're built on brownfield restoration sites or places that are toxic in general with toxic materials. So it's really a very negative loop that you're kind of trapping these people in. So once we get the costs down for installation techniques, we'll talk about that, and access to local materials, and then we have this data to back it up and show that it is all of these things that we know it is, then I think we'll actually be able to make some progress as far as marketing it as a sustainable, affordable building material.
That's great. Yeah, you mentioned all the toxic materials with formaldehyde and everything.
Yeah.
And just, to paint the picture fully, you're putting those toxic materials into the airtight box that we described earlier and trapping them all inside. So most of us are living in unhealthy homes, regardless of whether we're low income housing or just general.
In general. Housing. Yeah. And it's that, the Healthy Materials Lab, John Sarruth and Allison Mears do a wonderful presentation. You should have them on your show. But they talk about how you buy a bag of food at the grocery store and you can flip it over and you can see everything that's in it. That is in front of you. It is there for you to know. It's important that people know that. And we all know now how to read the back of a bag of food and understand how much sugar and cholesterol and all these other things are in it. We don't have that with our building materials, and that's arguably as important. You're ingesting, all of these chemicals and toxins in the air in the home that you're living in, and building materials need to be as transparent as the food that we eat, because it's as important. You spend, and now this is even worse. You spend 80 to 90% of your life inside of a building. In the last 3 months, I would say we're probably all closer to 100%, but, it's super, super important and something to be aware of, and something that people just don't think about, how their home is impacting their health.
Absolutely. Anybody who's ever put in a new carpet knows the smell we're talking about, and that's the off-gassing that is the toxic chemicals that we're all putting into our home environment.
Right.
Hi, this is Scott, co-founder of Sustainability Now. I wanted to remind you that resources and links related to this episode can be found on our website, sustainabilitynow.global. While you're there, consider signing up for a monthly membership to help us keep the show going. This year, we will be adding live events, long-form reporting, and interactive content. We started Sustainability Now as a passion project, and until this point, we've been completely self-funded. Your contribution will ensure that we can continue to build community, inspire hope, and share solutions. Thanks, and remember that together we can shape a world that works. Let's go back in time a little bit and talk a little bit about your background, how you got involved in all of this, and what brought you to where you are today.
I would say April, May of 2018, that I first became aware of the material. And then, started poking around and found Limeworks in Telford, PA. Limeworks is a historical masonry supply. They supply lime mortars and all kinds of wonderful, sustainable, building materials for historical restorations and otherwise. And they are one of two companies right now in the United States, or three, I should say, I guess it's three now, that are making a pre-bagged hempcrete binder and marketing it. And the wonderful thing about it is that it's 90% hydrated lime sourced from within the state of Pennsylvania. So it is a local product to us. And I called them and started talking to, a guy that's now a good friend of mine and a colleague, Chris Hertz. And that's who I got my introduction to hempcrete properly from. They were hosting a workshop. It was an expensive workshop. Limeworks does a very, very high-end workshop series for professionals. So they're teaching masons and plaster professionals, really high-end techniques. And this happens to be one of them, the hempcrete. Suffice it to say, I was the only one that took the workshop. Which was great because I got Chris all to myself for 3 days, and we actually did a little install on it's actually the entrance into the bottom of their barn, but it's built to look like a corn crib. It's a really pretty little thing, and we retrofitted that with hempcrete. So that was the workshop that sort of started it all for me. And in the process of that, Chris and Andy, the owner, recognized that I was capable and, had some building experience and some motivation, and said, hey, we've got this program for our masons where, you can basically sign up as a service provider, and then they will match homeowners who request, a reference with a service provider for whatever technique they're looking for. They didn't have anyone for hempcrete yet, and they said, hey, you should start a hempcrete business. So this is June of 2018 now, and I said, you know what, why not? I really liked it. It was amazing. It satisfied all of my urges to build and problem solve, and I don't have years of experience as a contractor or in a trade necessarily, but via my experiences with the nursery over those 10 years and managing projects and equipment and manpower, and my technical ability that I had gained on my own, just working around the house and doing things with my father growing up. I have the right combination to start this business. And the way that I've set it up is that I'm an insulation subcontractor. So I'm not a GC. I do have some of those skills, and I have done that for some projects, but I am marketing and pushing my company, Americhanvre, as as an insulation subcontractor that specializes in this particular type of biocomposite insulation material. So 2018, I formed my LLC. By December of that year, the Farm Bill was signed, and hemp was rescheduled away from its notorious cousin, and became a real commodity crop again, and that sort of opened the floodgates. And from there started networking in the area, joined up with another firm out of Blandon called Coexist Build, an architecture practice that focuses on sustainable material and building supply. And together we built the Hemp House on Wheels, which is basically a model hemp home on a trailer, on an old flatbed equipment trailer. And we got some traction immediately with the National Hemp Association and the PA Hemp Industry Council. Erica Stark and Jeff Whaling, had us bring this unit to a couple of shows last year, and just started making the rounds and putting ourselves out there. And little by little, here we are on the backside of a global pandemic where many people have lost their lives, many people have lost their incomes. Certainly horrible circumstances for a lot of people. But here we are on the other side of it, staring down a pretty substantial book of business, and surprisingly so, given the state of things. People are motivated, and the type of people that would consider this material to begin with, I think, are even more motivated and determined to make an intentional decision about how they're going to build their home, and that they're going to build with something that isn't going to kill them and isn't going to give them cancer, and that is good for the environment and stores carbon instead of creating it. So we have been fortunate. The train keeps rolling, and we've seen an uptick in interest. I can say a marked uptick in interest since the pandemic. So
yeah, I think that it's really, everybody has taken a moment to, a few months worth of moments to reflect on where we are, and
yep.
Rather than clamoring for the old normal, taking a little bit of a look forward into what should the new normal be. And I think you're well poised there.
Right. Right.
When you were talking about the workshop that you did and how you were trained to do the masonry work, I assume that was probably hand form work, traditional hemp and lime or hempcrete construction. And I know you just came off of a great new project that's taking that up to the next level. Can you talk a little bit about the new spray application and how that's working?
Yeah, sure. So, fast forward through last year, sort of where I just left off, in October, we had the first ever US Hemp Builders Summit in Ketchum, Idaho, hosted by my friends and colleagues, Hempcrete, Maddie Mead and Tommy Gibbons. We did a tour of some projects in the area that Hempcrete had done, and a couple of clients that they had helped who built their own houses. One of the houses that we saw was at the Idaho base camp, which is where Maddie built his first hempcrete structure. Wonderful organization. If any of your listeners are keen to look them up, Idaho base camp. Very, very cool. A collection of sustainably built buildings all on the same property, where they have, at-risk youth come up and experience, hiking and kayaking and camping and all those wonderful things. So one of the most recent buildings that they had built was a little bungalow that was built with a spray applied hempcrete method. And one of the guests of Hempcrete at the summit was Damien Balmer, who created this Easy spray gun. He's a French guy, brought his family, lovely people. They actually had come earlier in the summer to do a workshop with Hempcrete to spray apply this little bungalow, and it was ready and finished when we all got there for the summit. So we all got to see it. We also got to see Damien demonstrate the Lance, the spray gun, that day. After having done a handful of projects of my own, the traditional cast in place way, which is very labor intensive, I recognized right away that mechanization was going to be key to, reducing the cost of doing this. Number one, by reducing the labor involved, but also by shortening and compressing the sequencing times on site. So, one of the big things that holds hempcrete back is that it can take up to 3 weeks for, a team of 5 to 10 people to install the material on a home for an entire house. And then you've got this 6 to 10 week drying period before you can plaster it and finish it. So the spray applied method, the Easy spray gun, addresses a lot of that. The binder is a little bit different. It's still a lime-based binder. It still functions the same way. but it dries much quicker, and it's very light on binder. So the traditional binder, it's binder rich. You've got a higher percentage of binder to hemp hurd, versus the e-Reezy system has a much lower percentage of binder, and also less water. So you're not waiting as long for it to dry out. So not only is it a hell of a lot quicker to spray onto the wall, you're also, again, reducing that drying time and those sequencing issues on site. So shorter install, quicker drying times, smaller team. You can run that equipment with 3 people. So I was sold. As soon as I saw it, I said, this is awesome. So yeah, it's an amazing system, and it allows you to move much quicker. And, I bought one right away, and I actually took delivery of mine back in January, I would say it was, and demonstrated it for the first time at a workshop that we hosted with a company called Hemp Alternative down in Chester County. We hosted a workshop, great workshop, had about 25 different people from all over the Northeast. We showed them the hand-placed methods. They all participated in that, doing a retrofit wall and a mock-up new wall. And then at the end of the day, I blew all their minds by pulling out the spray gun and showing them how ridiculous what they just did was. So, and then, the pandemic happened. This is March 7th, was when we did our workshop. So unbeknownst to all of us, we were in the height of transmission. Fortunately, thankfully, nobody got sick. But, it wasn't but maybe a week and a half after that, Governor Wolf shut the schools down and basically the entire state. So it was really amazing the way that it all worked out. In the midst of all that, I got a phone call from Maddie at Hemp Entrepreneur saying, hey, we've got this client in Missouri who is building his own house. They're living in a trailer on their property right now. We need help. Will you come and bring your e-Reezy equipment and help us spray this house? We spray applied a house that would normally have taken a 5-man team about 15 days to do. I would say about 3 working weeks to do. We spray applied that house in 5 days with 4 people for 3 days and 3 people for 2 days. So, yeah, amazing. I mean, the proof was there. So this was the first residential home that had been spray applied with Hempcrete in the country. And we proved what we, again, already knew. We know that this system is dramatically quicker. I would say, 2/3 quicker, in terms of the time on site. They were 5 long, hard days, lots of troubleshooting, but the proof is there. We took a major step forward in making it more affordable to build with Hempcrete by cutting that labor cost by 2/3.
That's the amazing part right there. Even with your troubleshooting and figuring it out for the first time, you still beat normal production time by, cut it down to 1/3 of what it normally would have been with a smaller crew. So you've right. Started to attack one of the biggest challenges of Hempcrete or hemp and lime insulation is the cost and timing issues that you have. You mentioned sequencing, and for folks who don't know what that is, on a job site, you've got to get your plumbers and your electricians and finishers and everybody in there on a schedule. So you can't have one crew taking up a whole summer trying to do an install. Could you expand upon that a little bit? Some of the challenges today and how those are being addressed?
Yeah, sure. First and foremost, I would say is the access to domestic sources for the supplies. So again, we've got companies that are making, binders from American sources. We don't yet have good access to the hemp herd.
Now,
so the binder,
a processing problem or a growing problem?
all of the above.
Yeah.
It really starts in the field, and this is one of the things. And there are lots of companies out there, and I work with not almost all. I work with many of them because it's in my best interest to get access to the material locally as quick as possible. Mm-hmm. Here in Pennsylvania, we've had several initiatives, where people have bought decortication equipment and even contracted vast acreage And I'm, sort of, I'm not disheartened by it because it's a process, but we don't yet have access to a building grade supply. So that process starts with cultivar selection. So if you are in Pennsylvania, there are going to be cultivars, and you need to look to Europe, to other countries that are sort of on similar latitudes, that have a cultivar that might work here in our area. So now you've chosen a cultivar that should be appropriate to your area. Now you need to start working with it.
Just a point on cultivars, I assume, just anecdotally as well, that the vast majority of people are trying to grow for CBD right now and not for industrial hemp fiber, because of the the dollar signs of CBD products, as opposed to
everybody's going to be a millionaire.
Yeah, the longer development cycle of getting into a hemp fiber and herd production.
Right. So the Eastern Bloc countries, are probably the best sources for cultivars here for anyone that's looking to grow. There's a whole host of Italian cultivars as well, a little bit better suited to the South, obviously. And then you've got certain companies here that are working on, fiber industrial cultivars as well. And France is where I get my herd right now. And this will sort of help to answer your question. The company that I get my herd from in France, I'm a distributor here on the East Coast for a product called Cannabat. And Cannabat is the industry gold standard, based on the granulometry, the moisture content, the absorption capacity, the density of the herd, and then also the presence of dust and fiber and microbiota left over from the retting process. So it's not a simple thing to get to the point where you have a hemp herd that is suitable for building by all of those specifications. Excess dust and fiber will clog that matrix of air pockets. It will suck moisture away from the binder, which makes for an inferior set. Microbiota left over from the retting process on the herd, say if you've over retted the herd, basically it's microorganisms left on the herd that can lead to mold and rot issues in the wall. So you don't want to inoculate the wall before you even started. And then just the distribution of particle sizes that makes that appropriate matrix. It's all difficult to get to, and it starts with choosing the right cultivar, understanding how long to grow it. Fiber industrial hemp is taken before it goes to seed. If you allow it to go to seed, the lignin and pectin, which are the two compounds that bind the fiber to the herd, spike, and it ends up being a whole hell of a lot more difficult to separate. So when you're growing, your end use determines everything. End use determines cultivar selection. It determines the length of growing time, determines how you finish the crop. And it's all different. If you're going for fiber, it's different from going for seed or grain. And that again is different from going for cannabinoid production. So, this company that I get my herd from in France is the oldest and largest farmer-owned cooperative in the country that has been growing hemp since the early 90s. So they've got 30 years of experience with their cultivar, with their farmers, when to take it, how long to ret, what happens if it rains while you're retting. You know what I mean? All of these little issues that all dictate how, your end product is going to function. They take time to really establish. On top of that, you've got incredibly expensive equipment to buy to do that mechanical separation, the decortication part. It's not just the decorticator, it's the equipment to separate off the dust and fiber, and then the equipment to bag it.
Right.
That compression bagger alone, we get our material in 20 kilogram bales. It's a nice square compact bale, really easy on site to take one bale, pop it in the mixer, take a bag of binder, pop it in the mixer, all of your measuring is done. There's no thinking. And you can also move them around site a lot easier. So the compression bagger, the equipment for grading it down to the right size, the equipment for separating the fiber and dust, the experience of how to do that, and to get it to a point where it hits all of those specifications that I just mentioned. It's not like there's an answer out there, and there's a, we could do a whole nother episode just on what's holding back that side of the supply chain. But the equipment available, for producing this material is largely from, again, the Eastern Bloc countries or China, both of whom historically had access to incredibly cheap hand labor, right? So a lot of them require you to feed the material into the machine. So that means that it literally has to be hand fed and or laid onto a conveyor belt by hand. So there's lots of issues, and it isn't as easy, or it isn't a problem that you can just paper over with money. It takes time, it takes experience for the farmers. There are large standing orders, though. I mean, there are auto manufacturers and large building suppliers that have products ready to go. They just need someone who's able to supply them with a cheap source that can fill 10 containers a month. You know what I mean? So that's all of these things. Even for my projects, a typical home is going to be a third to a half of a container. So is there anyone right now that I can go to that reliably to give me the same product in those bales of a building grade hemp hurd and give me a container at a time? Not yet. You know what I mean? So that's one of the main things. So competition and innovation on the processing side definitely has to happen. Competition, in the lime binders. I mean, when Quickcrete decides that they want to make a Hempcrete binder, they're going to have a bag of Hempcrete binder on the shelf at the hardware store for $8. Right now we're paying $30. So, but that's again because there are maybe 50 homes in the entire country that have been built this way. So this is a very small cross section. So aside from the supply, I would say the one of the biggest hurdles is the environment around the building code. Our material does not yet have an ICC code index written for using Hempcrete. Now, for your listeners that don't know, the ICC code index is the overarching building code that we all use, every state uses, to bring a material from the state that it's at, like Hempcrete, where we're having success getting a variance situationally from a rural code enforcement office, where the guy, you go in and you approach them and you say, look, I'm building a home, it's still going to be framed traditionally with timber, and framed to code. But I just so happen to be using a biocomposite insulation material that replaces X, Y, and Z materials. They're fine with that. In a rural area, you'll get a variance. They'll say, okay, that's fine. Show me some European fire test data. In order to be able to do this for a commercial building or for a special use type of building, like a multifamily home, an apartment complex, something like that, we need the full host of thermal and fire resistance testing data, which is very expensive to get done. We have started doing it. In fact, Hempcrete is the only company so far that has had a Hempcrete mixture tested for flame spread, the E84, the ASTM E84 flame spread index. Hempcrete actually did that for the E-Reezy binder. So our E-Reezy binder for the spray applied gun is the only binder that has been tested here in the United States for flame spread, which again is not the full fire resistance test under load. That test is very expensive, and it involves building a sample wall on top of which they put 30,000 pounds, then they light it on fire. That's not the test that has been done yet. The test that has been done by Hempcrete is flame spread. So it's a measure of how quickly will this material light another material on fire if it catches fire. It's on a scale of 0 to 450, 0 being the best, 450 being the worst. And Hempcrete scored a 0. with the E-Reezy binder. So
Amazing.
Again, we all knew this anecdotally as Hempcrete builders. We've all taken a blowtorch to a block and shown people that it doesn't ignite. But now we actually have the test to back that up. So the ICC code is arrived at once you have, a broad, backlog of testing that's been done on the material for all of these different ASTM tests. So it's a long process and a very expensive one. And I'm sorry to say I don't, if I had $500,000 to do it, I wouldn't own it. It would be public knowledge. So we've chosen to band together as an as an industry under the flag of the US Hemp Builders Association, which is a 501c3 that you mentioned earlier. And the goal of the US Hemp Building Association is to get full code approval and acceptance for Hempcrete, such that any architect or engineer will be confident in rubber stamping it for projects, big and small. So it takes we will get there much quicker working together and cooperating and participating as a group and collecting those funds as a group to get all this testing done. So materials, access to domestic supplies of the materials, the environment around code enforcement, and then getting the methods down with mechanization and precasting of the materials to make them more cost competitive. And again, the competition and the access to domestic supplies will bring that down. Having the code will help to encourage that competition, and all of that will bring it more into the realm of viability as far as cost is concerned. Because right now I tell people, if you're going to build new, depending on how you design the home, if you've got to have 16-foot vaulted ceilings and all kinds of crazy architectural stuff, it can be, I tell people, anywhere from 20 to 30% more expensive up front. Now, I always caveat that by saying what we talked about earlier, which is that, you can see a dramatic reduction in the cost of ownership over time. So it's a loss leader like geothermal or solar, where yes, you are going to pay more up front, but you'll save that money over time. So it's important to frame it that way for people so they understand. And then encouraging the plastering trade to revive itself as well. There are very few plaster masons who are capable of working with traditional lime plaster, which is, again, what you finish hempcrete with. They're few and far between. A lot of older guys, not many young guys in it. And they don't have apprentices anymore. So finding, ways to initiate and encourage, tradesmen to get back into plastering. There's a great workforce development aspect to this as well, because you're developing a new method. Enthusiasm certainly is not holding it back. I have never met a person that I explained this to that said, that's a stupid idea, it'll never work. I've never met someone who said, I just really don't understand that. It doesn't make sense to me. So, it really does make sense to people, professionals within the space, even architects, engineers, building code enforcement officials. It really does make sense to them. They get it. If you take the time to explain it, they understand. What we don't yet have, though, is all of this American data to say, look, here's the flame test, here's the R value test, all that stuff. We have a whole host of European data like that, and that's been very useful to me in getting these variances written for projects in smaller areas. But we wanted to expand beyond that, and I don't necessarily agree with tract home builders, but I would really like to see them working hemp-based materials into their buildings, and having, precast modular systems that are hemp-based, that can be easily inserted on a one-to-one basis into existing trades. I think will really help this get some traction. So
it sounds like the Disabilities Option Network project you described earlier is going to go a long way to providing that kind of data and information for you. And then I know you have another cool project coming up in Delaware Water Gap project on the Hempstead.
Sure. Yeah, so that's a friend that I met through the All Together Now organization. He's got a beautiful heritage organic farm in Delaware Water Gap, East Stroudsburg, PA. Actually faces over the Delaware Water Gap. And I say heritage organic because it's not certified organic, but he bought it from the farmer whose family had owned it for 150 years. And never has a drop of pesticide or fertilizer been used on that property. Beautiful property, and you can tell when you stick a shovel in the ground that that's true. I mean, it's just beautiful soil. Lots of native plants, lots of native pollinators. They used to raise bees there. Wonderful place. It's got a beautiful old, 10-bedroom boarding house that we will be retrofitting with Hempcrete. And turning into a bed and breakfast for the hemp space, and there'll actually be a farm store on the first level of that boarding house. So, really, really great project, really great place, and we're gonna do some cast in place, the traditional method, probably do some spray applied, and then try to work as much as we can on the research side, embedding sensors in the walls to measure that thermal capacity and the moisture content, in different scenarios and things like that. So, really, really exciting project.
I went up there and saw the property, and I look forward to getting back out as you guys get into production coming up on site, and getting a little sweat equity into the project myself, and seeing how it goes. And I know he's got big plans for using it as an educational facility. So it's going to be a great new opportunity for folks here on the East Coast to get together and learn about all the things related to hemp.
Yeah, for sure. He actually just tilled his fields and will be sowing his first fiber hemp crop. He grew some CBD last year and made the wise decision of focusing on fiber this year. He had a little bit of encouragement on that, but it's important. And one of the things that will hopefully happen. He's also written us all into a grant for beginning farmers and ranchers. It hasn't been awarded yet. We're not sure if that'll happen, but the end goal of that would be to organize local farmers into a collective, just like they do in France, and using our partners in France to kind of help lead that and guide that so that we keep the profits in the hands of the farmers, and that they're producing a material that is, inherently sustainable and carbon sequestering and all those wonderful things. So, that's another thing. Every farmer that I've talked to says, and I was sort of surprised by this, that there wasn't any resistance from a, red-blooded farmer. They know it. They know that it's a real crop. They know it's a real commodity crop, and they're business people. And the first question is, okay, who am I going to take it to?
Right. In the last couple minutes here, let's give some people some resources if they want to learn more about what's going on, maybe some sites they can visit, organizations they could tune into and follow, maybe a couple books to read.
Sure. So, the handful of organizations that I'm involved in are the National Hemp Association. The Pennsylvania Hemp Industry Council is run by the same people, but it's state specific. The US Hemp Building Association, ushba.org. If you're an architect, builder, curious homeowner, student, whatever, we really need help and support on that end. We need people to participate. We're building out the committees right now and doing lots of hard work on that end. Books to read, everyone should start with The Emperor Wears No Clothes, Jack Herrera's book. That will sort of arm you and make you, a hempster. And then the Hempcrete book by Alex Sparrow and Will Stanix. That's probably the best text on Hempcrete. It's pretty widely available on Amazon.
Yeah, we'll have it on the show notes page when this episode goes live.
Yeah, for sure. Chris Magwood, the Endeavor Center. He's up in Canada. He's written a book as well that's pretty good. And what else? Other resources. Yeah, I would say as far as Hempcrete, the USHBA, National Hemp Association, PA Hemp Industry Council, all in that order. You got the Hemp Industries Association, Vote Hemp, all great organizations that really did a lot to push the industry to where it's at now. Yeah, and other than that, if I can think of anything, we'll definitely splash it up on the website. And of course, reach out to me if you're local or interested. We're again a supplier of the raw material, the herd, and we're also full service installation. But we can do anything from a phone consultation to an on-site training with you and your team. I've done quite a bit of that. Again, most everyone that's building with Hempcrete is either a handy homeowner or knows someone who's handy. So I've done, quite a bit of that where I show up for a day or two and train you and your team to get your project done. So very, very open and, flexible to whatever your needs might be.
Yeah, that's great. It's been so eye-opening, and hopefully a lot of our listeners will be investigating hemp construction moving forward here. And just want to thank you for your time and wish you all the best as we move forward. I see a big future for you here.
Oh, thank you.
Anybody who's interested, definitely get in touch with Cameron. And remember, as we always say, that working together, we can change the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much, Scott, for having me on. Very much appreciated.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Sustainability Now. Visit sustainabilitynow.global to find resources related to today's program. While you're there, pledge your support by making a contribution to help us shape a world that works. And remember to subscribe, share, and follow us on social media.